few pictures of the automatic sawmill. These pictures were taken about the last year the automatic ran before we moved over to the new sawmill. This is the debarker on the automatic. The operator stood on the right-hand side in the little building there. The logs came in the live deck through the debarker and then were kicked off onto the deck to go into the head saw. This is a picture of the carriage on the automatic. Rick Bonham is off bearing there. He is putting a slab down into on the big belt that carried it out to the chipper. I'm in the background in a little telephone booth type where I ran the machine from. This shows lumber being piled on the carts on the back of the sawmill. We had carts sitting on the right-hand side that would go out and out on the other end of the mill. I think we had a total of about 14 carts there we could load with different kinds of lumber. There's another picture of lumber being piled on the carts. That's Rick Bonham in the picture. This is a picture of the sawmill looking at it from the creek side. You can see where we pushed the lumber out and would pick it off with the pettibone. At this time the pettibone did all the picking the lumber off. He also sorted the logs, brought the logs in, unloaded the trucks, and at times ran the debarker. This is some of the crew we had working for us at that time. On the right is Rick Bonham, John Diltz, Gary Brown, Grant right behind Gary Brown, John Steffen, Ed Steffen, and then John Steffen, Zimmerman, and me in behind. Another picture of this, almost the same crew. The Rick Bonham, John Diltz, Gary Brown, Ed Steffen, Grant right behind him, John Steffen, Zimmerman, and Miles in behind Zimmerman. Get a good look at the pettibone here, sitting there on the right-hand side. This gives you a good look at our chipper. This chipper, and this was taken, it probably already ran 12 years. Very little upkeep onto it. Changed chipper knives and things, other than that, not very much. The belt from in at the head saw is in the foreground there. You can see the belt came right in, took the slabs in, went through the chipper and down into the blower, which blew them into the trailers. This is a picture of the trailers with a blower pipe. You can see the blower pipe going out toward the one trailer. We would usually run close 20 ton in a trailer. Vary. A lot of the hardwood chips went to Charmin. This is the grandfather clock given to me by Little Lumber Company for 25 years of service. It's made out of cherry. It isn't running right now. I need it repaired again. This is a plaque presented to me from Little Lumber Company for 34 years of consecutive service. I can see just a little bit, but I just can't make it out. How about hold it up against the side of it?
How is it here?
No, that's terrible. Can't see nothing.
The sun shines right onto it.
Yeah, that's not going to do any good.
How about stand it where?
Wait a minute, hold it right there. Nah, I guess we might as well just forget it. This is a plaque given to me by Little Lumber Company for 34 years of service. In about 1957, things slowed down. Miles and Otto decided to cut the crew on the sawmill to one guy and bring in the two men from the woods to help run the sawmill. What we would do, we would go out and we would cut enough logs to saw for a month or two, and then we would come in and run the sawmill. When we first did this, Miles started sawing. We were still using the steamer, but we would have Harry Brown come in the morning and he would get steam up for us. Miles ran the sawmill. I worked on the back end of the mill. Miles turned the logs. We did away with the pond. We had a forklift now, and the logs were sorted, and the forklift. So a lot of the time Otto ran the forklift, and he would come in and bring the logs in, and we had it so they could push them in quite a ways. And then we would roll them on in. Miles would saw them, and then we did away with the track, and we concreted the back end, and we put carts back there. We sorted the lumber on carts and picked them off with the forklift. So things were getting much easier that way. We continued working this way for quite a few years, but after Miles sawed for a while, Ray Spencer came along, and he took over the sawing onto it. I still work the back end. Sometimes it helped turn logs, depending on what had to be done. After Ray sawed for a while, Miles asked me if I wanted to learn to saw. So I started sawing. This was still using the steam engine. about 1959, we got a electric 75 horsepower motor and hooked it onto head saw. This was much faster. We could start right up in the morning. We didn't have to get steam up and everything. We took the big steam engines out, both of them. We broke them up, and they went to the foundry. Put the cast iron into them. They sorted the logs, so all the lumber that came out on the back end of the mill was the same kind now. We didn't need so many carts, so much to sort it. The softwood was still piled down tight on the back end, and we sorted it out in the yard. But it was much easier than it was in the first place. We bought a lot of our logs out in the woods by the thousand, which means they had to be scaled. I did all the scaling of them. I would turn the scale into the company, and they would pay the people according to whatever kind of logs we had, the price that they was worth, and this is the way we bought a lot of our logs at this time. This picture was taken over on the Fort Fred Houseworth job. It's Otto, Henry Evans, and Joe Granovich. We cut some very nice pine over on Fred Houseworth. This is a pile of logs from the Fred Houseworth job. They're piled out along the creek. At this time we were piling the logs out from the store along the creek on the upper side of the sawmill. Otto did quite a lot of the piling of the logs there. These pictures were taken by Mac Ritter. He was over there on the Fred Houseworth job with us one day. This is Otto. I don't know who the other fellow is on the left. This is also on the Fred Houseworth job. Shows Otto, me, Joe Granovich, Henry Evans. And the crane is in the background holding the log up. This is also where Fred Houseworth. It shows us bringing a full-length tree up with a crane. We would drag them up full length and then cut them up. Saves having to pull the cable so much. And Henry Evans standing here with me running the crane. This is a picture of the logs piled along the creek. You can see the trees in the background that come up there behind them. The creek is just beyond that. These pictures were taken with my 8mm camera. They're also down along the creek bank where we piled the logs on the upper side of the sawmill. These pictures are also taken over on the Fred Houseworth job. They were taken by my 8mm camera. There's the crane again. Henry Evans. We cut the Houseworth track and Catherine Ash's track together. This is some of the Catherine Ash track that was marked. They were side by side up in the upper Raven Creek. This is between 1968 and 1969. These pictures were taken of the sawmill. This is the old carriage. This is the same carriage we used on the steamer and the electric sawmill. This is Ray Kern's car. I took these pictures down along the creek. One morning it was down below zero. We were sawing. You could see the steam rolling off the creek. It was so cold. We sawed whether it was cold or not. We sawed every day. This is the first day of trout season down along Fishing Creek. I took my camera to work with me one day and I went out and took a picture up along the creek. Three generations of bosses here. Otto, Miles, and Grant. Harry Barber with his boom truck. There's a Pettibone coming up through the log yard. Dale Remfrey's running it. There's Dale and Harry Barber. This is Mike Hess. They're planting some lumber out alongside the sawmill. The planer was on the other side of the sawmill, but that's Alvin Miller. But in order to make room for more carts, we pulled the planer out and put it on this side of the sawmill. The little planer planed a lot of lumber. These pictures were taken on the Josie Ash job. This is the last job we did. In fact, this is almost the last tree we cut before we went to the automatic sawmill. We never went back out in the woods again. We cut some really nice red oak on Josie Ash's job too. That was right along Lower Raven Creek. That was Henry Evans cutting it down. That's Henry and I using both power saws to cut it up. This is where we're getting ready to set up the automatic sawmill. There's the controls for it. This is the controls for the new sawmill, the automatic we were getting. Handles on the right are to turn the logs. Pull them in from outside on the live deck. I didn't turn the logs anymore after that. You had a live deck to bring them in, and here the logs were piled over along the old railroad track, right straight across from us there. We ran this sawmill for about 14 years, the automatic, before they put the new one in. Some of the best logs that we ever cut was Johnny McHenry's large pine trees up on Whiskey Hill. These are not some of them, these are hemlock. But they were very big trees. We cut a lot of them up there. And red oak, the biggest red oak we cut was over on Jap Thomas's at Roarsburg. We cut some over there that we'd only haul 3 on the truck. The dump trucks though, we weren't using army trucks at this time. We would load only 3 logs on and bring them over. They were large, red oak. As you can see, the logs were now piled on the other side of the mill. We are looking over toward Carnegie Canhouses. Miles purchased the new automatic sawmill from a man over at Shunk. We went over and took it all apart, moved it over and set it up. We thought maybe only about a month. but we ended up was over 3 months setting it up before we had it running again. Nice logs in the pile. If a log was too big, I'd take the power saw and split it in half. Sometimes we would get one that would be too big, like the ones from Jeff Thomas's. I couldn't turn them, we'd have to split them. When we put the new automatic in, everything was used. We made chips, sold the bark, sawdust. There was nothing wasted anymore. My job was sawing, sharpening the saws, greasing it, and changing the chipper knives, which usually had to be done every day and sometimes twice. We sorted all the lumber on the back now and stickered it. As it went out, it was set right up. That saved a lot of time. We didn't have to rehandle anything anymore. concludes the pictures I have of the sawmill. I'm going to talk a little bit about me and being around the steam engine. Littles moved to Benton in 1947. In 1948, I went down looking for a job. Otto put me to work immediately, unloading a trailer load of 2x4s. We unloaded them right at the planer so that the planer could plane them. You unloaded them 2 at a time. There was no forklifts, nothing to unload them quick with. The steam engine, the sawmill was run with a steam engine at this time. The large steam engine would run the line shaft, which ran the planer, the cutoff saw, and the rip saw, and the smaller steam engine ran the head saw. The steam engine ran pretty efficient as long as it was up about 90 pounds of pressure. The steam would stay up, but if the pressure got down, then your saw didn't run fast enough. It wasn't too efficient that way. We had a guy, Ray Kern, lived out back of the mill in a small house. He came in every morning, got the fire going. It would take about an hour and a half to get steam up, and then at starting time he would blow the steam whistle. He was always right on time with it. The logs came into the sawmill by army truck. Littles was using army trucks at this time because all-wheel drive, they could get in and out pretty good. They would come in and they were dumped into a pond. The pond was just off the sawmill, and the exhaust from the steam ran into the pond to keep it warmed. There was a bridge over the top of that, and we had pike poles. We'd get up on the bridge and push the logs over to where you could get a hold of them and pull them with a winch up into on the rollway of the sawmill. Then we'd roll them down to be sawed. None of the logs were sorted at this time. They were just brought in right out of the woods, dumped in the pond. So when you got the lumber was all mixed up. At this time we had a cart. Well, we had 2 carts that ran. The track ran from the sawmill by the side of the carriage all the way out almost to the street. We would put the lumber on the carts, the hardwood lumber. We would push it out and pile it and sticker it on both sides of the track. The softwood lumber we would carry back behind the planer, sort it for width, and then it would be planed green. We'd go through the planer, we'd pile it right onto a truck. We'd take it out in the yard and pile it and sticker it. This took a lot of handling of the lumber. Later, this didn't work good because the sun would split it so bad after it was planed. So later we left the lumber dry. We'd sticker it and let it dry rough and then plane it. This worked much better. The hardwood lumber, we would run it out the track, pile it off on these piles, and then at this time we had a trailer truck. Woody Moss was driving the trailer truck. He would back in alongside the piles and we would load it by hand. Woody worked for many years for Little Lumber Company. He was a very good truck driver. When we was loading it on the truck, Woody would be up on the truck piling the lumber. Miles would usually count it and grade it, and I would hand it up or down, whichever. If the pile was high, it was easy. You could just hand it down. But when the pile got low, sometimes we would use 2 guys to hand it up. We got cement in at this time by carload. We would take a truck and go up to the railroad car. The cement came in 70-pound bags. You would carry it off the car onto the truck, then you would go down to the warehouse and carry it off the truck and pile it to be stored in the warehouse. We did the same thing with lumber when we would get lumber in by carload. It worked the same way. I worked on the sawmill at this time for about 3 months. And then Dad and I got a chance to cut logs. They needed some extra logs. So we went up in Jemison, Elk Grove area to cut some logs. At this time we were still using the crosscut. The logs, we cut them, and they were skidded with horses down to a skidway, which they had built special. Then they would roll them from the skidway onto the trucks. This is the way we got them out of the woods. Dad and I cut logs for about a year, and they got too many logs ahead, so we got laid off. So I went to Lake Jean. They were building Lake Jean at this time, and I worked on Lake Jean most of the time it was being built. In 1951, I went into the Army. I came home in July of 1951 on a 5-day pass. Eve and I were married. I spent 5 days at home, went back to camp, and shipped out immediately. We didn't see each other for 20 months. We didn't have many fights. I came back in 53, and in early 54 I went to work for Littles in the woods, cutting logs. I was working the Jemison City, Elk Grove area most of the time. I had my own power saw at this time. I was cutting logs on a per thousand basis. I got $8 a thousand, and I scaled the logs. This was much better than the sawmill, where they paid 75 cents an hour and you worked 35 hours a week. At this time they had a Bantam loader. They had bought, while I was in the Army, they bought the loader. It was mounted on an Army truck, and it had about a 20-foot what am I thinking? Boom onto it. You could swing the boom back and forth, and it carried 300 feet of 3/8-inch cable. You could swing the boom back and forth and guide the logs around the trees. We had to cut the logs up because we were cutting too far ahead. Later, we quit cutting the logs up because we were hauling them out just as we cut. And we would bring them in full length and cut them up. And this worked much better. You didn't have to pull cable near as much. At this time, I would like to thank Grant and Miles for keeping me working all these years and not really having too many problems.